Hello and welcome to Property Roundup here on iPropertyRadio with myself, Carol Tallon, the show where we chat to industry experts to get a view on activity on the ground and to learn about new trends emerging. This show is sponsored by daft.ie, Ireland's most visited property website. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Karen Reynolds and Christopher Clare of Reynolds and Clare Estate Agents. You're both very welcome. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
So, people might not be familiar with Reynolds and Clare estate agents. You're one of the newest independent estate agents around the country, and we do try to chat with independent estate agents shortly after they open, because I think there's it's a really interesting phase of an estate agency. So I'm delighted to speak to you both today. But you might just give me a little bit of background about yourselves and maybe how you came to open the firm.
Sure. I guess, look, we've both collectively been working in the industry for well in excess of 10 years. My background and experience has always been in new homes. So working in new homes agencies, servicing developers. 8 years of that was spent over in London and the UK, which is obviously a very, very busy market, before returning here to Ireland and working for lead agencies in Dublin for the last 3 or 4 years. Karen.
My main experience is working client side with developers. So I have worked with dealing with customers head on. I also have good experience in lettings and management as well.
Very good. And then, well, in terms of it's great to see such a focus on new homes, but the fact that not only do we have a dearth of second-hand properties coming to the market right across the country, and obviously we'll get into your particular region shortly, but in terms of new homes, particularly Christopher, you haven't spent so much time in the UK. What would be the key differences, I suppose, between operating in the new homes market in the UK and Ireland?
I suppose the key takeaway when you look at London versus Dublin, I suppose, is that there's a lot more supply in London. For a start, they seem to be able to service that sector a lot better. I suppose when you look at planning regulations, UK versus Ireland, it's not as lethargic as Ireland can be. So they seem to be able to deliver an extraordinary amount of homes year on year. Of course, London is a bigger city, a growing city, a population of 10 million. So it's a very competitive market where, back home in Ireland, the planning system can obviously slow things down. It's very frustrating. I think there's a real lack of a labour force, particularly in construction at this moment in time, which is hampering developers delivering new schemes in a timely manner. And obviously lack of supply with land and viable land and ready to go sites with planning, which developers are always very keen on getting their hands on. So those will be the key differences, I suppose.
Yeah. And Karen, you've come from a background where you've been working directly with the developers, and that's a very different model to agency. So how are you finding the transition, I suppose?
Well, I've done both. So I've done new homes agency as well as working on the client side as well. So I found it quite easy. Not easy, I suppose. Well, it's a bit of an easier transition across because I know kind of what the client is looking for, and then what would also help with the purchases as well. I kind of know both sides what both are looking for.
Yeah, and I suppose you're both bringing then into the new agency very strong relationships in the new homes market, and that's a great positioning tool for you guys because obviously when you're opening a new agency, by the way, where is your office?
It's in Navan in County
In
Meath.
So if you were solely dependent on the second-hand homes market, there can be a bit of time required to build up trust, to build up the brand. It's one of those chicken and egg situations. You need your boards out there. Digital, I'm a huge proponent of digital, but at the end of the day, when you're a local estate agent, you do need your boards up. They're a massive selling tool. They're a massive part of the brand and the trust building locally. But you can't get those boards up until you win the hearts and minds of some of the local sellers. And that's very difficult when there's so few local sellers. So maybe talk to me a little bit about the geographic areas that you cover and what's the market like at the moment.
Yeah, so we're covering all of County Meath, Carol, for sales and lettings, predominantly at the moment. So, based here in Navan, as you rightly say, it can be very difficult for a new agency to get up and running, get their name out there. And we've invested heavily in marketing and whatnot to that effect. And so far, the support, particularly in Navan and the immediate area around our office, has been incredible. And we've been quite lucky in terms of getting new listings on. But obviously, there is a real lack of supply and need when it comes to properties coming to the market, as is the case in most places around the country. So I guess, because we are doing lettings as well, lettings is, I suppose, a way of getting out there out of blocks a lot quicker, a lot more quickly, and getting your boards up. And thankfully, that has allowed us to engage locally with people in the community that are looking for our services, particularly around lettings and property management, and also with sales as well. But at the end of Q1 this year, there was only 384 properties on the market in County Meath. So, it really is very competitive, particularly when you're competing against local agents that have been established here in Navan for a long, long time.
Yeah, look, that's absolutely understandable. I suppose the rental market, though, the 384 homes on the open market or the sales market, it just shows how the shortage of second-hand homes. But we know that actually across the rental market, that's even more constrained. So where is your new business coming from across any sector? Where is your new business coming from?
Our new business is coming from a heavy investment in online marketing, on our website, on Google, on Daft, on paid ads, on local signage around the town. It seems to be generating a lot of inquiries, which is fantastic for us. We also offer services for people looking to buy in and around County Meath, so buyer services, and that's been very well received so far. We get an awful lot of inquiries from Irish people that are living abroad, particularly places in London and Australia and New York, that are trying to make that move home, which is of course very difficult when you're living overseas. So that's been a fantastic way for us to engage with people and to go and view properties and offer and bid on properties on their behalf whilst they are overseas. And we do that, in various ways, with video calls and FaceTimes from the properties, etc. And thankfully, most agencies these days are offering online services in terms of very high level video walkthroughs of Matterport and those kind of things. So that's been a great success for us in the short term, helping those people achieve their goals whilst being based overseas.
I'm delighted to hear you talk about the buyer's agency services, because I think that that's a real opportunity for estate agents right across the country, particularly where there's a slow secondhand sales market, and where there, in some parts of the country there just isn't any new homes activity. So from that point of view, the buyer's agency service is a really important one, and we will be covering this in a show later in the quarter, because actually, after we interview estate agents around the country, our number one inquiry in either on social media or by email is, does that firm work for the buyer, or does that firm offer house hunting services?
Yes.
And that's a question that I just don't think would have even come up 10 years ago. And it lends itself to kind of an interesting thing here, that estate agents always position themselves, while working for and being paid by the seller, they always position themselves as being very helpful to the buyer. But when you go beyond being helpful to providing a service that is covered under contract, and obviously accrues a fee, is there a transition or a different sort of a conversation that has to be made, or it has to happen really, to make sure the buyer understands the difference between you being professionally helpful while working for the seller, or you actually spending time helping them look for something?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, look, predominantly as agents, we are always used to representing the client. They pay our fees, and we have their best interests at heart always. When instructed by any client, whether it be in new homes or resales or lettings or whatever the case may be. Of course, when you're transitioning over to offering, though, a similar service to a buyer on the buyer side, you do have to, I suppose education is key. I think when dealing with or representing buyers, about what you can do, where you can make a difference, how you can help them achieve their goals when it comes to buying a property. And particularly, again, touching back to those that are based overseas, where we're getting a lot of inquiries that have been away for such a long time, and they're just out of the loop when it comes to the Irish property market. they're not on the ground. They haven't got feet on the ground. They're not too sure what's happening. They're online. They're reading articles, a lot of which can be scary. So they really need help, and they really need education in terms of what's happening here and how they can best position themselves to reach those goals. So it's really just an honest, transparent conversation with what we're seeing here, what they should be doing to give themselves the best opportunity of actually purchasing something. And that is it fundamentally.
Yeah, thank you for taking us through that, actually, because I think that's a question that some estate agents around the country struggle with. And I know we've spoken about this before. We know it's an opportunity for regional agents where there is a really low volume of transaction happening in their local area, that actually it's a service that people want. And it's a service that estate agents are really well positioned to provide. But and despite there being a PRSA license there, or a contract there available as a template showing estate agents and valuers how to do this, and auctioneers, that actually I think it is that conversation, it is that positioning where when a buyer comes in, how to engage them as a buyer client, as opposed to somebody that might just acquire a property that one of your sellers has. And I think that's a bit of a difficult transition to make, but it's one that's so important for estate agents to make, if particularly around the country, if they want their business to sustain through this period of very low stock levels and very low activity levels. And I think, when we're talking about how maybe the business of a state agency is changing with the introduction of things like buyer's agency as a fee generating income, I think similarly in the new homes, we've seen that over the last decade. Karen, I know you've worked across both agency and directly with the developers, but working directly with the developers and obviously knowing that world, we've seen over the last number of years a trend for almost a trend going back to decades ago, where actually new homes developers like to keep their sales and marketing in-house. And that's, that can be a real loss for agencies. Do you see that something that in terms of that as a trend, do you think that's something that only the very large developers will do, or is that something you would have a view on?
I think it would just be something that the larger developers would do. I know smaller ones that we would deal with, we would help them with that. So I think it will be something that'll probably just stay with the larger ones.
And
Yeah.
in terms of the relationships, I pointed out earlier that you both are coming kind of very strongly from the new homes market, so therefore you probably have very well embedded networks and relationships. But actually, one of the things we've seen historically, that new homes or estate agencies that tend to really excel in new homes tends to be those that maybe were involved in the sale of development land. So actually there's a really long, that could be a decade long relationship that has to happen. So in the absence of you not being established a decade and longer, where are you looking at for your pipeline of new homes?
I think development is pushing further and further outside of Dublin, and because of lack of opportunities for site, particularly with planning and ready to go. So developers that may have only focused on specific areas of Dublin or Dublin as a whole are pushing out into the greater Dublin area to find opportunities. And unfortunately for us, a lot are heading towards County Meath. And we're seeing massive developments in Navan, in Trim, in Duleek, in Ashbourne, Dunshaughlin, Dunboyne, all around. And I suppose the agents that have transacted on those lands, without naming names, I suppose, but predominantly are based in Dublin, from head offices in Dublin. Their new homes team was being very, very experienced in the marketing and delivering new homes developments, and might not just know those areas as well as local agents like ourselves. So I suppose where we see ourselves fitting into the new home space in the short term would be as a joint agent with those larger agencies across developments in County Meath. And I think, for us logistically, for those bigger agents, it's very advantageous because we're here, we're on the ground, we're probably a short drive away from the site. So whether it's meeting buyers, doing viewings, doing handovers, accommodating valuations and all those kind of things that happen throughout the process, we're here, we're on the ground, we can help those and alleviate some of the logistical pressures for those larger agencies in Dublin, as well as providing, I suppose, a lot of local knowledge to prospective purchasers who might just have more intricate questions about schooling or transport and all those kind of things, and that we would have plenty of knowledge about.
And actually, you bring up a very important point there, in terms of transport. Certainly, the county of Meath was always seen as a commuter county of Dublin, and it was maybe perhaps a place that people chose when they had to commute into Dublin every day, because there was quite an easy commute, probably stronger public transport than there is in some of the commuter counties. But part of the driver was affordability. And how has that changed in terms of not just the second-hand homes market, but also new homes? What are the price points that buyers are looking at out there? And do these price points fall under maybe some of the new homes help to purchase schemes and that?
Absolutely. I think, look, the vast majority of transactions happening in County Meath, and I know it's the same in other commuter belt towns and counties around Dublin, is new homes. Probably 80-85% of transactions are new homes. And I guess the first home scheme has improved incredibly popular over the last couple of years since its introduction. They've thankfully increased the new homes cap in County Meath by 50,000 in the middle of last year, from 375 to 425, which is a massive advantage for those looking to get on the property ladder. And I suppose the first home scheme, coupled with the Help to Buy scheme, is allowing those that otherwise would have been stuck renting or stuck living at home with family, etc., actually make that transition to buying and owning their own property. So that has been a massive help, I suppose. With the second-hand market, prices have remained predominantly flat year on year at the end of Q1. Some towns have seen a slight increase of 1 to 2%. But predominantly flat, with a median house price in Meath now of 295,000. But that's not to say that areas such as Trim and Navan are seeing capital values far in excess of that. If you're looking at a kind of a 3-bed semi-detached second-hand property in Navan at the moment, you're certainly looking at 300 to 350,000 for a turnkey property, where that same house, it was a new home, would probably be pushed to the upper end of that cap of 425. So, if you're lucky enough to be in a position whereby you have a significant deposit and can buy a second-hand property, there's a saving there to be made, really, for lack of a better phrase. But if you are utilising those government schemes, then the reality is, if you're looking for a 3-bed semi-detached home in County Meath, you're going to be looking towards the upper end of that kind of 400 to 425 number.
So who's buying locally? Is it almost all first-time buyers?
Almost all first-time buyers, Carol. And I suppose one thing that we're definitely seeing with the first home scheme and the Help to Buy scheme, with our new homes developments, is that people, like, geography and location is something that people are increasingly flexible on. Their journey is taking them from perhaps Wicklow to Kildare to Meath, and as far as Mullingar and to Westmeath. So it's just what they can afford. What are the transport links like? Can I get into Dublin in kind of less than an hour, whether it be by train or bus? And people working from home, obviously, as well, allows them to be far more flexible. So it seems to be more about the property and the space and the quality that they can get, and they're far more flexible on the actual location itself.
But in that vein, have facilities, all of the placemaking elements, caught up with new homes delivery then in those areas? Because when I think of, say, Ashburn 8 years ago, 6 years ago, all I think of is a traffic jam in and out of Dublin. It was definitely a traffic black spot. So
Yes.
COVID obviously changing so much with people having better flexibility about when they travel, and not having to travel to the office so frequently. But in order to support that, you need a lot happening locally. So, you need schools, you need parks, you need co-working hubs, you need recreational facilities. Are all of those starting to emerge now? Because look, we know that it isn't the perfect situation that we create a place and then we build the homes there. In Ireland, unfortunately, unlike in other European countries, we have always done this quite backwards. And in fact, it's usually the developers of the new schemes who are bringing so much of the placemaking into the area, but the areas themselves need to be regenerated, you know, and I know there's the town centres first policy that's really trying to improve retail and tackle dereliction and all in some of these towns. But placemaking, if we want people to relocate to, you know, places that aren't their homes, and yet to bring their families to invest in schools and education, you know, there needs to be the makings of a life, not just a home. Is that happening across the towns you mentioned there, you know, Navan, Trim, Ashburn, Duleek?
I think yes and no is the answer, Carol. I mean, I think, certainly when it comes to transport with Meath, the entry, there's good access into Dublin. There are direct bus links from Navan Town Centre, express buses straight into O'Connell Street and beyond. There needs to be more of them. Those bus routes are becoming exasperated by growing numbers of people moving out to County Meath, and I suppose the pull of people having to go back into the office over the last year or so as well. So we definitely need to see more of that. There's obviously been, from a political perspective over the last number of years, a big cry to reintroduce a railway system from Meath back into Dublin, which I think is badly needed and would really make Meath far more attractive to those looking to escape Dublin and be able to get back into the city with ease. So I think that is something we need to see. Around the town centres, I mean, Navan, for example, myself and Karen do joke that it is becoming a little bit like a mini Dublin, with kind of these cool, arty, retro, hippie kind of eateries and bars and stuff opening up, which is great to see. So from town perspective, with retail and social spots, we are seeing a lot of development and investment from that side of things. New link roads in and around the town, which makes getting around a lot easier. But I think that missing piece from Meath into Dublin needs to improve greatly, as I say, with more bus routes, more regular services, the introduction of a train line at some point in the coming years would go a long way to helping the local area.
Yeah, look, that makes absolute sense, and I think maybe part of the puzzle here is that COVID has changed how we live and work, and it has changed how we choose and where we choose to spend time, and that's not reflected in the National Development Plan at all. So I know that changes are afoot, but the reality is, we can see today what the pipeline is likely to be, at least over the next 18 months, possibly beyond. So when you look at the people who are inquiring with you, so whether they are first-time buyers or people looking to trade up or down, and what they're looking for across County Meath, do you see that they will be able to not just find the property they want, whether it's a second-hand or new homes, but that it will be affordable to them given their own circumstances?
Not always, I guess. Again, coming back to the new home side of things, yes, if they're open to new homes and are interested in a new home, it is a lot easier for us as agents to tick those boxes for them. Particularly if they're utilising the first home scheme and the Help to Buy scheme from an affordability perspective. And we're quite lucky in terms of where we're seeing a lot of regeneration around Meath with new developments are quite close to towns. They're not stuck out in far off rural areas. So we're able to tick the boxes in terms of local schools and facilities and amenities that you would expect and need when buying a new property. I suppose when you come to the second-hand market, it becomes a little bit more difficult because there are less of them for sale. If you're looking to upsize to a 4 or 5 bedroom detached home in County Meath, it's very, very competitive from the buyer side of things, because they are like hen's teeth at the moment. You'll have a lot of inquiries, a lot of viewings, very busy open houses, and we're seeing, as I'm sure Karen will attest to a case she had last week when we were representing a buyer looking to buy a 4-bed detached home and Trim, just where the bidding is getting to, from the asking price to where it's actually being agreed. It's an extraordinary jump, and it's quite exasperating for buyers in that category.
And just actually on that point, exactly what kind of figure are we looking at there, where we talk about just really, so buyers listening in today might have an understanding, in terms of bidding, how is that likely to jump? So say for a second-hand home, if they're looking at something that's on the market at 400. What's
Um,
that likely to jump to?
yeah, so the house that we were helping our client with, it went on at 400,000 and when sale agreed just before the weekend at 467.
Wow, that's a huge jump.
Yeah, and it was an ex rental house, so it's still money
Needs
needed to
work.
go into it as well. Yeah, yeah.
And were they all mortgaged first-time buyers bidding?
No, actually,
No,
there was two
no.
bidders for cash, and it
Yeah.
went to a cash buyer, which was look, I know from the seller's perspective is very advantageous, but
Yeah.
Karen touched on something just there where that property had been rented for a number of years, and
Mm.
that's obviously another trend we're seeing in Meath, as we are in other areas, I'm sure around the country, where landlords are just exiting the market in their droves, because of rent caps in areas like Trim, where boy, mortgage interest rates have obviously increased significantly over the last number of years, and that the rent just isn't keeping there to make it a viable investment anymore. They're not seeing their returns, so they are exiting, which I suppose is good if you're looking to buy, but extremely competitive as Karen mentions when it comes to bidding.
Yeah, I think from a government point of view, I think there has been a huge amount done to stimulate new homes delivery, but I think our policies towards rental have been an absolute shambles. And in fact, I can't understand how we are walking from one poor policy into another poor policy. I mean, even the
Mm.
IMF coming over every time they fly into Ireland, they point out that the rent caps, not only are they not doing the job the government think they're doing, they're
Mm.
actually hindering new people coming in. So, I mean, we talked about who's buying in County Meath. From the time you opened your doors, have you seen any investors coming in who want to get into being a landlord or offering properties to let?
I think we might have had one case, and it's just not something we're seeing or likely to see until the points you just mentioned are addressed,
Yeah.
and there is some kind of reform, and making we need all kind of tenures in this country to meet housing demands, and we obviously have the big multinational landlords buying multi-unit developments, but we need the kind of single property landlords as well, particularly in areas such as Meath and Navan. So there needs to be some kind of reform, particularly on rent caps and taxation for landlords that makes, either retaining that property that you already have, or reintroducing yourself into the buy-to-let market more viable and more, just a viable option for you, which it
Yeah.
just isn't at this moment in time.
Yeah, and look, I think I mentioned earlier that our national development plan is really out of date, and we know that's in the process of being rejigged in terms of figures. But the government's official targets kind of are still somewhere between 30 to 40,000, depending on which department you speak to. We've had the likes of Ronan Lyons coming out more than 2 years ago and saying, no, that figure is much closer to 60, 65,000. And then just this weekend, we had the Housing Commission say, actually, for the next couple of years, that figure might be closer to 80,000 new homes needed per year. And I think that's a jump that our policies are just not set up to protect against it all, or to help deliver on. And the really frustrating thing is that the construction industry, the development industry, they've been priming for scale through modern methods of construction, through offsite, and they've been priming, improving their capabilities and scaling, but also priming themselves to be able to increase that scale en masse as and when needed. But actually, it's the policies that are failing to keep pace. So it's something that I'm hoping will be addressed, and we'd like to think that the new planning and development bill will go some way towards alleviating some of the delays. But quite frankly, that bill has been watered down to the point of now we don't know if it will have that impact at all. But I do try to leave things not so much on a positive, but at least on a helpful note for people who might be looking at buying. So you mentioned the challenges there for first-time buyers competing with maybe cash buyers for the second-hand homes. We know for the first time, or for first-time buyers, new homes does offer maybe some unique opportunities for them to avail of schemes with government supports. So, I mean, Karen, given your perspective working across agency and directly with the developer, are there any tips you could give to first-time buyers if they're are currently exploring new homes, you know, when they're going looking at new homes, have you any tips maybe for not just around the development but the property itself when they're touring?
Um, God, I don't know. What do you think?
What
I
are the
think
questions? What are the big questions first time buyers have when they're being introduced to a new development, a new scheme, a new home?
that look, they're very interested on how the property is constructed,
Yeah.
whether it, brick built, timber built, steel framed, what is the BEO rating on the property, all those kind of things. I think buyers are very, very interested in getting into the nitty gritty on that. What's included in the property?
Yeah, flooring.
Is the
Yeah.
property floored? Are the kitchen
Yeah.
appliances included?
Yeah.
All these things. And I think, we've seen developers probably have to over the last number of years scale back in terms of the finishings they're offering
Mhm.
and what's included because of the rising costs in materials and construction as a whole. So, and that's something, look, buyers are, when it comes to buyers that are interested in new homes, they're very, very savvy. They're very, very well educated. They've been around the block a few times. They've looked at multiple developments. They've maybe missed out on a few. And, by the time you might actually get sat down in front of them, have a conversation with them, they are very, very well across and they know what they need. They know the questions that they need to ask. But yeah, I think what we do get is, BEO ratings, is included, is there parking, is there appliances, do I get a side gate? All these kind of things, which, depending on what developer they've been dealing with before, might not have been on offer. So those
Yeah.
are the kind of questions that we are getting.
Do you know, it is fascinating to me that they are asking about how these are built, because actually that's a conversation we have quite frequently here in the office. And is that something that general consumers are aware of, that they place significance on? Like, we know the building energy performance, absolutely, so we know that one of the early questions is around the BER, but how a property is built, that just shows that there really is an evolving buyer, that we know they're older, we know they have to be earning a lot more money than they were kind of 20, 30 years ago, but it's interesting to see how maybe the questions they have when they're approaching buying a new home, how they've changed. So that's a really interesting one. But look, thank you both so much for talking to me today. It's really interesting to learn not just what's happening in terms of property across County Meath, but also, I think it's really interesting. We're delighted to welcome a new independent estate agency into the marketplace. More of that, please, right across the country, particularly when you're offering buyers agency services. Well, I think it's a real advantage for both buyers and sellers locally. So very best of luck to you both and to your team. And thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to checking in with you maybe in a few months and seeing how some of the new homes developments are coming along. But for now, that's all we have time for. That was Karen Reynolds and Christopher Clare of Reynolds and Clare Estate Agency in Navan, County Meath. My thanks as always to Katie Tallon and to the production team at Hear Me Roar Media. And of course, huge thanks to our show sponsor, daft.ie, Ireland's most visited property website. And thank you indeed for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next episode of the Property Roundup. In the meantime, please be sure to check out all of the other Irish and international real estate and construction shows here on iPropertyRadio.com.